Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a wargames manufacturer, a creator of female miniatures, and the CEO of Bad Squiddo Games, all the way from Nottingham in the UK. Welcome, Annie Norman, to the show. How you doing?
Hello, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you finally on the show. For those who don't know, just a little bit of a tidbit in going into this episode, I actually created a voiceover for one of Annie's recent products, a tree pen. That was a lot of fun getting to work with her, and of course that led to this show, and now we're doing this a full month later. So well, I guess the first thing to ask is how did that go with the tree pen?
Tree pen's awesome. I just thought, why didn't I bring a tree pen in? They're in the other room, so I could display one. But no, the tree pen was like a silly little side project that I worked on, and obviously you were involved, and it went really well. So I was really pleased because it's nice to just do little fun things. So that was nice, sort of like, yeah, let's do more little fun things. And the amount of people that have mentioned it since as well, they're like, oh, we didn't get in on the Kickstarter, but we're going to get it when it's out and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Change the world.
Do you know when that drops then? Because I was a little bit confused at first. Like, I was like, oh, okay, so you're doing like a GoFundMe type deal, or Kickstarter, sorry.
Yeah, Kickstarter.
Yeah, just to get it kind of to market and stuff. And yeah, I saw within like a week it was already getting good numbers and stuff. So when are you planning on releasing it then?
So what happens with Kickstarters are super common in the tabletop world, which is why I always ask people at the start, like, have you heard of Kickstarter? Because in my world it's really common, but then a lot of other people like, no, or isn't that the place that you can get the ultimate belt? When I look through it, when I look outside of gaming Kickstarter, there's always at least 10 multi-million belt Kickstarter projects on it for like, this is the last belt you'll ever need. This is the last wallet you'll ever need. These socks aren't just socks. They're really expensive socks.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
it's just this whole other world. So originally Kickstarter was sort of set up to get projects off the ground with obviously crowdfunding, but it's become a bit more of a sort of pre-sale in this world. So I've been using it, I think, over 10 projects now, where it's helped to get the money upfront, but a big part of it has been the advertising. So a lot of people shop now on Kickstarter. So they go and browse there for the latest projects, and it's really weird, and I still don't get it. So if I release something flat, I go, here it is, the entire product is ready, here it is, buy it. It's kind of sometimes like, yeah, I'll get that at some point. Whereas if you go, here's this thing, you won't get it for a few months, and there's no guarantee you'll get it. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So I tend to like rotate between, I still like doing a lot of standard releases because some people just go pure Kickstarter. But I use Kickstarter when I feel the thing could do with a boomph, because they get shared, there's loads of hype. I think the limited time as well helps. So you really make an event of it. So with my Kickstarters, I've usually got the thing made, but then it's the extra money to get it into production and to know how many to put, especially with something like a tree pen, where I have absolutely no idea. I was like, man, if I sell 5, it's still good. I love that pen, but it's entirely different to, say, my other projects where it's got to be in the hundreds at the very least to sort of make it worthwhile. So the idea with the Kickstarter is that it's usually about, people do them for anything from a few days to a month. Mine usually about a week, because when it's on, that is everything. So, and there's always a dip in the middle where it just kind of stalemates. So I'm like, I'm going to cut that dip because that is the worst dip, because you just kind of like, and you'll get like a few people leave as well. So with Kickstarter, yeah, people put money in, they can up, down it throughout the campaign. So until that final date of it, someone could put in 10 grand and then just take it out. And so that's why it's also a fun sort of thing. So people, they sign up to Kickstarter, they put the money in, the end of the campaign, the money's taken out, and then you usually assign how much time it will be till the people get the product in their hands. I'm generally awesome and get stuff out really quick, partly because my casters are awesome. But for a lot of them, especially board games where you've got all sorts of different manufacturing, it can be like years basically till they get the thing. And then a lot of people don't do it. They don't release an item after the Kickstarter, whereas I always do. So basically, as soon as I've fulfilled all the pens from this, then it will be in the shop as just a standard purchase item as well. But the next task for me now is to message everyone that has backed and ask what color, because there's a million different pen colors, and it comes in a few like casted colors and stuff. So I round up all that data basically and all the shipping details, and then there's this cheeky bit where people can, as they're adding the shipping, it's like, do you want anything else while you're here? Which is always great, because people might come for one product, be like, oh, that's a cool pen, and then whilst they're doing that, they're like, oh, you do all of this stuff. I'm like, oh yes, you can just add that in while you're here,
just slip right in there, you know.
Yes, you might as well. So yeah, that was my rundown of sort of how tabletop Kickstarters work, basically.
Oh, thank you for sharing. How did you get into, I suppose, because there's a lot of ground to cover with what you do. So in a nutshell, for those who are sort of familiar with this territory, I'll try and give a brief overview from my understanding. So I don't know about other countries, but here in the UK, we've got a shop called Games Workshop, which is around the country. And essentially, you get a lot of different figurines from different franchises. So Warhammer would be an example of one. And you get anything from more popular, well-known franchises like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, to maybe just original content that no one's heard of, but like a lesser known than, say, the bigger brands. And
people's own IP.
yeah. Again, I already realized as soon as I'm explaining this, I'm already at my depth. But essentially, when you say tabletop games, that what you mean is, like your kind of classic D&D style on a table with, maybe there's mats, maybe there's nothing, different terrains that people paint and create. And of course, one of the things that you do is create female miniatures, and we'll get into that in a sec. But I suppose what I want to start with is, how did you kind of get into all of this? Because obviously you're a designer, you're an artist, so there's that. But how did you transition into specifically this realm?
So I've played Warhammer since I was a kid and was just really into it. And I think obviously that's how a lot of people get into those sort of industries, because they have that childhood connection. So I began a company called the Dice Bag Lady in, I can't even remember what year it is now, let alone then, a while ago, about 2010 maybe. What are we now? I had to look to see what year it was.
I forget as well.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I set up a company called the Dice Bag Lady after started just making some dice bags when I got back in. Everyone has a sort of break and then comes back to it. So when I come back to it, I started making some bags. That took off. So I ran a company called the Dice Bag Lady for quite a few years, till about 2015. So up at that point, I'd built a really solid sort of fan base, customer base, online presence, doing custom handmade bags for dice, which a lot of people then were like, is there that much of a market? I'm like, yes. There's this whole nerd undercurrent. It's a lot bigger in America. It's very mainstream from my understanding, having not been to America, but it does seem a lot, especially, D&D, celebrity D&D players. Whereas here it's a lot of people might have heard of Games Workshop, but that's about it. I bust my wrists from repeatedly crocheting and embroidery, so it's a warning. Okay. Warning to kids out there, don't do heavy crochet, it will mess you up. But by that point, I was already quite established. I didn't want to leave the industry because I just liked being there. So I decided to have a little shot at making miniatures. And up to that point, even though I'd been in the world, I didn't really know how you make miniatures, which is partly now I help a lot of people that are just starting out, because I'm like, there was nobody to sort of go and ask, because it's kind of obscure sort of industry. There's no basic, you can't Google quite so much how to make minis. And something that I'd had issue with in my own gaming was when I started playing historical more than sort of, when you're playing elves and fantasy and stuff, it's all very different. But as soon as I started playing historical games, I went, I just want some women in the army. That's okay, I'll look on the internet. Nope. Nope, there aren't
Interesting.
any. So it'd been something I'd been kind of ranting about, usually on Twitter, going, why aren't there any women just doing the things that I can use in my army? So I thought, okay, I've got a chance to do something about it. I've been playing Dark Age gaming, like Vikings and stuff. And I thought, well, if nobody buys it, a lot of my things start with, if nobody buys it, I've got something for myself, and then it takes off. So this took off massively because, yeah, I thought if it doesn't, I spoke to a few companies who were like, we only make sexy miniatures because that's all people want. So I went, okay, I will try anyway. And yeah, if no one wants it, I got what I want, I guess. And we're now over 7 years later and 550 miniatures that are just the lady miniatures. We've then got like another 200 animals, a few chaps in there, a few weird creatures. We've got stuff like guinea pigs and tanks. Yes. And we have a massive scenics range. So I definitely kind of started a company by accident. I brought Shieldmaid along just so, because I haven't done interviews for a while. I went all diva and like, nope, just because they were very repetitive. So the reason I wanted to come on here was because it's a different angle. So it's good that you kind of don't quite know it because it's just not the same sort of questions. So I've brought one along for the viewers as well that probably also largely don't know or have a vague recollection of Paint and Space Marines as a kid. So that's sort of size. I've not got the best camera on here, but
Look at that.
For scale, this is your general standard Shieldmaid and Mini, which is what the company was all about.
I will say now, everybody that listens to the show just in auditory form, is that right? Yeah. Make sure you go and check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube and Spotify so you can see that, because it's a really great little figurine. And of course, you can check out these figurines on Bad Squiddo Games, and I'll make sure there's a link to that as well.
There's a painter that I follow, and he always puts his hand in the pictures, and I keep thinking that's a really good idea, because I get stuck in this assumption that I'll casually mention Kickstarter and things like that are standard, but I know it's still in this bubble. So I thought that was a really good idea, because you see them, they're sort of cropped and white, and there's no sense of scale. So yeah, just having a human hand as opposed to a monkey hand or something. But yeah. So yeah, it was a rage idea that got out of hand, which is kind of going to be on my tombstone, I think.
There's a few angles I want to tackle with this. I'll return to the female managers in a second, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is, now this is just from my childhood. I remember these shops started popping up in like the mid 2000s, specifically Games Workshop. I'm not sure if there's any other brands in the south. I just remember, because I grew up in London, so I remember seeing
that's the high street,
right?
That's the only one that's got high street presence. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Games Workshop.
And I was intrigued. I think we all were. And I'm a massive, huge nerd. I never got into it per se, but I would always like to sort of just check in the shop and just see what was going on. And obviously I was a huge fan of, I still am, computer games and stuff like that. And there's a lot of crossover there and whatnot. But I suppose one of the things that you mentioned, which I find interesting, and since then, I mean, that was the early 2000s. Now it's 2022. It's 15, 20 years later. Why do you think that it's not as popular here in the UK as it is in the States? Now, obviously, I know people are going to shoot me for that question, like, oh, it's bigger, it's more well established. Okay, great. Those are good points. But then, you've got shows like Stranger Things where they, highlight the kids actually playing with it, playing like D&D style games, because it's hugely popular in America in the 80s. That's where it originates, and that's how it's come over here. But it's interesting to me because this crossover between the States and the UK, generally speaking, is pretty vice versa. It normally goes back and forth, but this is an area where it's not quite transitioned in that manner. It's popular, but it's still kind of like a niche thing. Why do you think that is? And do you think it's grown in popularity since then? Have you seen a noticeable surge in popularity? Like, what's the kind of the deal there?
So I don't really know, but there is quite a distinction between, in tabletop games, it splits really into role play, which is your D&D stuff, board gaming, and wargaming. So I've got a wargaming background, although recently I've been getting more through doing more fantasy miniatures, been getting more into the tabletop world. And then board games is kind of adjacent to it all. And in America, it's the role play, say like the Dungeons and Dragons, where there's not a huge amount of miniatures involved. It's very much about the writing and the books and the theatre of the mind, which is apparently a really cheesy phrase that I only learned last week, so I keep using it. Theatre of the mind.
I like that.
The UK's got a huge history with wargaming, because obviously Games Workshop was started here. It's the biggest in the world. I'm in Nottingham.
Oh.
It was founded in Nottingham. So every, other article in the local things about Games Workshop as kind of like where I was originally from, it was about Weetabix, because everyone's got their own, local industry thing that they like to roll out. So it's kind of strange here that it's wargaming, because it's they've got their own lorries. You see the Warhammer trucks go by. They're advertising on the tram. It's kind of everywhere. But it's definitely getting a lot bigger. I don't know quite why America. Maybe it's just because it is a bigger area. I don't know. But it's always been here and always been very strong. But I guess kind of underground and I think there's way more nerdy perception here, whereas it's a bit cooler and cooler people in America. I don't quite know. But I know that the my leg's gone board gaming, and it wouldn't be a stream without my leg going dead at some point.
Beauty of it. I love it.
But board game roleplay have absolutely exploded in sort of like the last 5 years. I was at UK Games Expo last week or 2 weeks ago, which was it's the biggest convention of that sort, and I think there were about 30,000 people there.
Damn, there you go.
So it was a big nerdorama, and it was ace. Like, it was really ace. Again, for me, with the more of the wargaming background, being in that sort of land, and it's just like my world. So I've done lots of conventions over the last 7 years, and some of them, it is a bit like, is this dying out? Because there's not much diversity. There's not that many young people. And then to compare that to a board game roleplay event, it was just like diverse. Oh, that'd be a good game. Diverse city.
Okay. She's created a game. She's created a game on the show. There you go.
But yeah, like just the amount of like, it was just a huge mixture of people, which was so cool. So the industry is absolutely massive. And I know that it used to be, if I kind of went in anyone's house and sort of saw board games, they'd almost certainly be mega nerds, which is not a bad thing as a mega nerd and you're a mega nerd, but it's way more sort of, it's people in the street and you wouldn't even know. It's like not even self-proclaimed nerds, it's way more common now for people to have board games and role play. So it's definitely getting, and I think things like Stranger Things, there's licensed games I think are doing a huge for it. So having role play and war games in things like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Marvel, like here's the thing you like in a different format. So people are way more likely to go, oh, I like that thing, I'll try this out, rather than brand new experience. So if you're really into the Hulk, you might want to play the Hulk game, and then that's the sort of entry into all the other stuff. So where I am is the very tiny end of it. So yeah, you've got, in terms of the UK, you've got, the world is Games Workshop, and then there's smaller levels down where they've maybe got, I don't know, like 50 employees or something, and then it's the little pyramid type thing, and then there's just loads and loads of companies that are under 5 people, and down to Bad Squiddo is still just me, but I do employ a lot of freelancers, and then those freelancers will work for other war games companies. So there's a lot out there, and I think once you first find it, then as I did when I first discovered outside of Games Workshop, I was like, oh, look at this, they're making their own minis. Oh, so are these. And then it's just like, we are all here. You're like, whoa, there's just so much out there, which you wouldn't, I guess, because, you don't wander into a Bad Squiddo shop on the high street yet. So,
That's interesting. Yet. What are your future plans then? Do you plan on maybe introducing something big there? Do you plan on maybe trying to hit the American market? What's your plans?
trying to hit the American market at the moment is my #1 goal. Well, I've hit the American market pretty hard, to be fair, but it's a very big market, so I'm trying to get a lot more. But yeah, about 50% of what we sell goes to America, which is huge.
That's huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. So trying to just get more people. So we provide a lot of retailers and distributors, which is also something that was awesome at UK Games Expo, because I met lots of different retailers. So I need to sort of, so as I was saying pre-show, I'd had some time off afterwards, and now I've got lots of delicious emails that are talking about that.
I'm so happy for you. Well done. Congratulations.
So the retail side of it's huge. And there's a lot of small companies that are really anti-retail, and it really like, it's like, yes, Games Workshop, the biggest. They got that big by only selling direct, surely, not by having millions of shops across the world. And it's totally their whole thing is it's shoving it in people's faces, because even if you're not that interested, like you said, you see it on the high street and you're like, oh, I'll have a little look, and it's that sort of there. So I've got quite a decent internet presence, but it's still nothing, because the internet's the entire world. So there's only so far I can personally push. So when you've got more sort of collaborators, partners, retailers, they're all then pushing the stuff. It's like, and all these little pockets, and it's a lot easier to grow. And that, especially with things like Brexit that's happened recently, if I was only selling direct, would have been absolutely catastrophic. But already having in place things like European retailers, it's just so much easier just to get everything out there. But yeah, as a small company without that mega, I don't have an advertising section. I go to Games Workshop's HQ is in Nottingham. It's called Warhammer World, and it's absolutely enormous. And I'll look at that and be like, you've got an advertising wing. So like the bigger you are, obviously, as in any industry, you can push it. So it's really hard for me, because currently I do juggle pretty much everything. It's hard for me to do that big push, which is why if you can get more people doing it, and especially if they're doing it for their own benefit, as if, as in they're a retailer, they want to sell your products because they make money, then that's when you get that sort of natural reach. So that's what I'm super working on at the moment. And I've got some big retailers in America, which is also good. So I'm selling a chunk and then selling a chunk to the retailers that pass it on. So I'm hoping to go to Gen Con next year and work on, it's pretty much happening, I think. I've just not said officially, because things happen. Like the last year, we've had, like not even on just an Annie scale, obviously a pandemic and war and all that sort of stuff. Like, who knows what's going to happen in the next year? Nanobots or something. Like,
I totally I can relate to you on this, because like one thing I've started to do now is whenever I get exciting news of something that might happen, I desperately want to tell people, I want to share, but then I'm like, I remember, no, just wait. Like the best time to tell people is when 100% that it's happening. Like maybe you're in it doing it, then share it, or after it's happened or whatever. Because for some reason, if you do it before, not always, but a lot of the time, somehow it just doesn't happen, or something affects it. I don't know, maybe it's just some weird universe stuff, but it just seems to affect it. I don't know. I get
it. There was something on YouTube, I don't know if it was a TED talk or something, it was something like that, that I listened to not too long ago, and it was saying about not telling people your plans before you do them.
Yeah.
But like things, so not specifically things like trips, but like say for example, I'm going to try and make something crazy. So I want to launch 5 shops in the UK. And I tell everyone, so my plan is I'm going to launch 5 shops in the UK. And then everyone goes, that's amazing. And you get all of the sort of, the dopamine reward, and your brain is almost like you've done it. So you're like, yeah. And then it sucked any any drive to then do it, because you've got the rewards just for having the idea without doing the thing. And it's a way to keep yourself motivated. So yeah, you've already got your mental applause and stuff, and then you're like, oh well, don't need to do it now.
That's interesting. I've never heard that specific angle on that. Like the thing I always think about is, oh, don't tell people your plans because, you know, if they might wish you ill, or they, you know, might wish that it doesn't happen for you, you know, and stuff like that. Because of course it doesn't matter who you are, you do have haters. Everybody has haters. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Especially if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to achieve something with your life, build something from scratch. Oh my God, do people want to bring you down? And it sounds to me like you've dealt with that at some point. Do you share anything that you learned from that?
Well, yeah, as a woman in a very male-dominated industry, trying to make things more accessible for women, I need a nice little trophy, or like a survivor trophy or something. So yeah, just along the way, in various different forms, I've had people just trying to put me down, discredit me, attribute my work to being somebody else's work that I'm the face of. Every April Fool's, I want to say that I'm actually just hired as like the face of some other like mysterious benefactor. I'm like, no, because it'll stick with me forever. No one will take it as an April Fool. It's a lot better now, but trying to build up the company was really exhausting, and I forget sometimes how hard it was, because I'll think, oh, it's pretty cool, everyone's quite accepting. Like, no, they weren't. They are now that I've proved myself, which you shouldn't have to do. Now it's, you know, that's like one of the guys thing, and I'll think, oh yeah, maybe wargaming is a lot better for women. Like, no, it's because they don't. I'm now exempt in that sort of like privilege. I don't know what it would be like. Not fame, a privilege, because I'm not famous, but I am well known in that world. So it's kind of like that whole, oh, not you, you're okay. It's the other ones.
Well, I mean, this is interesting to me because it sounds like it's twofold as well. Like, you identified a niche in the market based on a lack of representation. You were like, oh, that's weird. There's no female miniatures. There's, well, female characters. Okay, yeah. Well, I want there to be. And you look for that, you couldn't find it. You're like, well, I'll do it then. And then you started doing that. And then on top of that, you've said that you faced pushback. And I'm guessing is this at every level? Is this, or because you've sort of said that your business model is essentially like B2B. So you're dealing with, you know, like other companies, suppliers, whatever, right? And because you said it's like a male-dominated industry, I'm guessing that implies that like they didn't take what you were doing seriously, or maybe they didn't think it would sell, something like that. You proved them wrong, and then now you move into a point where it's like, okay, well, we accept you, but you know, we still think this way, kind of deal. I mean,
yeah,
is that kind of the deal?
It's kind of, because we sell to business, we also sell direct as well.
Okay.
And I'm still very much in that sort of online community, which is always a blessing and curse at the same time. And it's always negative people that you hear. And now I've kind of got my own validation from the fact of like, it's working clearly. I've been here. I know how much I sell, all that sort of stuff, that I can knock off the sort of bad comments. But at the start, when I thought I was grown up then, you know, when you kind of look back and you're like, oh, I thought I had everything together, and I didn't. Yeah, I thought then like I was, you know, I was solid, I was on it, but I was so insecure, which makes sense because I was like, I have to look at the date to figure out my age. I was like, I was 25, and I was in a brand new industry, and I did stand out very much. So all these sort of negative things people would say would stick in my mind. And even though because it did get a mixed reception when it sort of launched, but there was so many people that were just really, really positive. So not long after I'd launched it, I went to the biggest, specifically wargaming show in the UK with it. And that was kind of my make or break. Like, if people like it, it's going to go well. If it sucks here at this mega show, it's going to suck everywhere, sort of thing. And I did get loads of online crap, but then in person, it was just people come up going, yes, this is amazing. Yes, this is
what I mean, man. Like, about why people shouldn't take online stuff too seriously. Because, like, realistically, in real life, people don't really have the guts to say negative stuff. I mean, like, you know, if anything you got that was negative in person, I wager would have been more constructive than anything else.
Yeah. But yeah, so there was that sort of community thing, and then there's
Right.
different companies that I've been companies or contractors and things like that. And there's definitely, again at the start, there was a lot of dismissal, and it was this sort of Annie's silly little project, and that was kind of every angle, and it wasn't the majority, but that's the stuff that sort of sticks when you're already full of self-doubt. I set it up on no budget. I set it up out of debt because I'd got into debt from my wrist injuries. Whereas a lot of the larger ones, you know, people set it up with the savings, or they've sold a house and they've got some cash or something. And I was kind of just doing it in like, put this money in, so make enough money out of selling that one miniature to then be able to commission another miniature. So it's been a real like fight throughout it, but it's why now when I just, especially when it's set up somewhere like a show where I've got it all laid out in its lovely display and I've got all the cabinets out, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And now, yeah, there's the sort of people that wouldn't have given me the time of day before do now. And then there's always that like, yeah, you know, like in those teen films where they have the makeover. It's like, oh yeah, the boys that didn't notice you are now like, hey, and then it's that either like, yay, the boys are noticing me now, to you didn't give me the time of day before. So trying to sort of juggle like who to give a bit of the benefit of the doubt to, and who to just be like, yeah, no. So that's been a whole interesting sort of journey, but I definitely want to sort of put that there's just been so many really cool people, but I also had this fear of being helped, because anyone that helped me, it'd be like, oh look, you're just getting, you know, you're just smiling at people and they're doing this for you. I'm like, no, it's normal, people help each other, that's what they do. But I was so not wanting to look like, you know, I was kind of being given special help upwards or something, that I resisted lots of help too. So I was like, let's just make it as hard level as possible. And that is just absolutely bizarre. But I've been learning, because I used to think that there were basically no women in this industry. And I've now learned that there are loads, and there have been loads for some time.
Oh, cool.
But not so much on the, it's that sort of visibility level. So when I was younger and playing, I was always like, oh, wow, it'd be so cool to work in Warhammer one day and that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, but I don't know. Trish Carden's a very famous sculptor who sculpted for Warhammer till not that long ago. She's retired. Well, she's retired, but she does some freelance. So I want to do something with her at some point. But she was the only woman I knew of in this whole thing. And now, having spoken to a lot more people, and I know that there are so many, but they're just not in that sort of eye, which is why I now try and kind of shove my face everywhere and then get people going, oh, she loves herself. Like, no, I really don't. But the more I whack my face on it, and, you know, the more people, especially, you know, little girls, are like, yes, there's the person. That's the person that I could be, that person, you know, sort of thing. So I'm always trying to make, you know, also not be like, hello, I'm the first woman to ever work in wargames. Like there's been a lot. And that's another interesting one. Even from quite early on in those sort of D&D Warhammer days, they were there. But obviously it's still the minority, but a lot more than people would sort of think, especially the sort of, you know, online gatekeepers of, we don't want women entering the hobby. Like, they made it. They made it at the start.
What advice could you give to aspiring female business owners?
Run. No, don't run. That's terrible. That's
just
terrible.
run.
Just run. Don't bother. It's just to kind of believe in your own, because obviously if you're new to something, there is great advice to take from people, but there's also not doubting your own hunches and your own feelings on things, which I still do. Because I'll really be dead set on something, and then someone else will convince me otherwise, and then it turns out I did have it right, you know. So it's finding the balance of your own, your own getting it sort of thing, and obviously, learning from people who've done it for a long time. So there's things that I've maybe released, and as I was about to release, someone said, "Oh, don't bother doing it this way because you're not going to sell many or something. So I've gone, okay. And then I've sold loads. And again, now through the kind of, the proof in the pudding thing, I know that I can do stuff. But at the start, it was that fear. I've gone off on a tangent. As I do. What advice would I give? I'm like, I don't know. It's tough because you do have to kind of get more crap than you would otherwise, and it is really easy to just go sod this, I'm out, and I've thought that many times along the way, but it's persistence, I think, and also not to sink to that sort of not being a lad, that's not the term, but being becoming the person that stopped you at the start. I don't know how to put that into some sort of eloquent.
No, I get what you mean. Like, were you talking about before, like gatekeepers, like not becoming a gatekeeper, not becoming someone that would prevent others, like, from succeeding where you succeeded,
to some extent, and also just that in general business. So something I see in politics a lot, and it's like, oh no, what you doing? But it's like a lot of women in politics have kind of got to that position by acting like the worst men in politics because that's how the system's set out to be. So yeah, like I could be dismissive of, now I'm past that threshold, I could go, right, yeah, I'm not going to let anyone else in now, and like, I'm the queen. That's why it gets cut. I'm the queen of wargaming. Yeah, because you can go, right, I'm safe, yeah, I now must protect my space in this sort of thing. But no, it's just to try and stay humble. Sounds a bit rubbish, but yeah, I don't know.
That's cool. I dig that.
But it's hard. I think I was talking recently because I used to, before I set up Bad Squiddo, I used to be quite involved in the Warhammer tournament scene.
Oh, cool.
So I played a lot of tournaments, and I got really competitive in that. And one of the reasons I quit in the end was because when I started, if I was sort of, because at that point it was me, and then there was occasionally one or two other women at the tournaments, but that was it. Whereas now it's a bit better. But anything I did basically was then taken as all women. So if I lost a game, people go, see, I said women were rubbish at Warhammer. I was like, what? No, that's just me. That's just me. And there'd be guys that love being on the bottom table because, you get the whole, top tables, bottom tables. And a lot of people would go for the weekend, have some beers. That was the appeal for me. It was that, like, go along, do some socialising, roll some dice, have some beers, meet some people, go to a different city. And there'd always be those people that kind of, they took, some rubbish stuff that was fun because, you can get like a bit like video gaming, you can game it up and have the ultimate killer, killer list or whatever, or you can have loads of gnomes or whatever like that. So there'd always be the guys that just take all the gnomes and have a great time, and everyone would go, oh, that's Dave, yeah, he's a wicked guy, just loves having a fun game. But no one would say, oh, Dave is representative of all men in wargaming. So I quite quickly went, okay, so I need to prove that women are awesome at wargaming via myself. And so I just got way competitive, and then I started getting angry with myself near the end if I'd lost something, and then it was this kind of point of like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I shouldn't have to prove anything.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and I think that would probably fit into the better advice thing, like not having to prove things, or at least to yourself, because I just thought I have to show everyone. And then that meant I didn't have the same experience because I just wanted to be Dave rolling some dice, and if you win it's cool, but if not, it doesn't really matter. So that's when I look back on that, I think, whoa. And then that was very masculine setting as well, so it was very much that survival by being one of the lads.
So how long ago was this, roughly?
So this was about 2010 to 2014, I think. So yeah, I'm 20 to 24.
so since then, do you? I mean, you've mentioned there are more women. There's more women in the industry. There's more visibility. But generally speaking, like, how do you feel? Do you feel that it's better now? Do you feel like there's less people saying things like women are not good at Warhammer and statements like that? Like, are you not hearing that stuff anymore? Like, do you? how do you feel about it now compared to then?
It's a bit what I was saying before about that privilege type thing,
Okay.
because now if I walk into a Warhammer shop, there's a good chance someone will go, "It's Annie from Bad Squiddo Games,"
Oh, cool.
and therefore I'm not treated the same as if it's hello, young lady that's wandered south into this shop. I had so many horrible, when I was a teenager, I had so many horrible Games Workshop experiences, and I'm
Oh.
so glad that it seems to be largely better now. Warhammer World is in Nottingham is amazing, and they have so many women working there, and it's so friendly, and I'm just like, thank you for changing. But yeah, it's definitely getting better, not as fast as it should be, compared to other things, but it's definitely on the. And as much as no matter what I do, I'm still relatively small, but I know I've had an impact within a part of it, as in customers have said things, other companies, I've worked with other companies, sort of helping them with their design, stuff like that.
Wow.
So I know I've definitely had an impact, but then it's still, it's still like the little mouse doing something, whereas, Games Workshop the last 4 years have started adding a lot of really cool women into theirs, and they're always going to be the biggest. And other companies don't quite like it when I say it, but we do kind of like get the drippings off Games Workshop. We're like, oh, delicious drippings, because that is how people find it. They see the shop, they get into that,
No,
and they go, what else is there? It's okay. I don't mind.
Yeah, it's like any other industry. You've got like your market leader, they're the market leader,
Yeah.
or the most recognized brand. I mean, and to be fair, there's no reason that it can't increase and become more popular. I mean, I would say just in general, like from an outsider's perspective looking in, there's probably going to be more intrigue in this moving forward because it's something different. It's not, let's take video games as an example, right? Video games is just embedded in society, culture, whatever, right? When we were growing up, it was still kind of a novelty, online gaming, whatever. Like it was a new thing. It was fun. It was different. Whereas now it's just part of society. So it's not kind of unique anymore. And that's everything is like cyclical. Do you know what I mean? So like where these things like tabletop games and stuff like that were around many decades before, now they're kind of re-emerging. They're having like a new lease of life, and it's different. And then there's all these other options now, as you mentioned before. And I'd like to quiz you on that in a second, by the way. But you mentioned that there's like role play, and you mentioned there's tabletops and all this. So there's that different
subgenre.
Yeah, like different ways of doing a similar thing. And yeah, that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. Is like, in a nutshell, what is the difference between roleplay games, tabletop games, and then wargaming?
So tabletop games kind of covers it all. And online, yes, that's kind of like the umbrella-y term, and that's shortened to ttrpg quite a lot. So if you see that around, which also then gets called titterpigs. It's just an easy way. That's you done. So roleplay is very book-based. So you have your books, that's got all your main sort of product is the book. You have your character. You could some people play campaigns for decades. Like they'll meet up, once a month, once a week with their group of friends. And it's just an ongoing quest. So you can do things like one-shots where you could do it over an evening. But yeah, some just go on forever, basically.
So
others
cool.
Could be a year, a month. It entirely depends how you want to play. So yeah, it's all the adventures. So people get very attached to their character, as you can imagine, because it's like, oh, all the adventures we've been through. And whereas war games so sometimes it's not essential for figures in those, but people like them just to have something to sort of represent, and they'll sometimes use like a board or grid, so if you're traveling through a dungeon, you've got a bit of a visual of what's going on and like where you are. So if they go, there's a door to the left and whatever, you don't forget because you've got your little map. So that's the one side. And then wargaming is figures. It tends to be mass battle, but it's now a lot more skirmish. But you have your figures, and your figures are the characters, whereas roleplay, you're the character, and the figures are just like a bit of a marker, really. But yeah, war games, it's all very much about the figures and a one-off battle. You can do campaigns again, but it's less of that personal character sort of development. So they're both very similar, but also very different. And you do tend to, there's a chunk of people that go across both, but there's still quite a bit of a split between, which was why it's the first year I traded at UK Game Expo this year, and I was really nervous because a lot of wargames people had said, oh, it's not very good for us, it's all the roleplay people. I'm like, but I want the roleplay people. So I was really unsure, because like, how many people actually use minis? But the fact that it went absolutely berserk, which is why I've been off recovering from it, it was like the maddest weekend we've had. And again, had so many fresh people going, ah! And because we do stuff like capybaras and guinea pigs and all that as well, that also just made some people's brains explode because they were like, yes. Wow. So yeah, that was awesome.
I mentioned it a few times throughout. I want to sort of cover it now. You make female miniatures, and in the run up to this episode, you told me kind of off camera that you do like extensive research for this, because it's obviously like a lot of historical figures that you use as well. It's not just like mythical. You actually go for historical women throughout history. So what can you tell us about these female miniatures, your research process, everything in between?
So recently we've been doing a lot of fantasy, and that's why I've been into that sort of role play land, but the heart of it is historical, and that's less cool, which is why I'm trying to like do my own thing with bringing people in, like, look, we've got elves and stuff, and then they're here and you're like, right, so in World War II, and they're like, no. But yeah, that is the less perceived as cool. It's very much was it like Mark from Peep Show would sort of play it, that sort of thing. But occasionally watch it and go, oh, I'm Mark. I don't want to be Mark.
No way. You're a sweetheart. You're not. Mark is like the worst representation of it, because it's like he captures the inner nerd, but then he is terrible himself, and it's like, well, it's cool that he's a nerd, but does he have to be such a douche?
He's the worst. But yeah, so the largest sub-range we do is World War II, which is something that prior to that I had zero interest in. And I now look back at all the cool places that I went to as a kid and was like, oh, this is so boring, I hate it. And I'm like, oh, I really want to go there now. And I think that was the female involvement. I think when you get interested in something, there's kind of like a thing that you attach yourself to, and that's the bit of interest. And reading about women's experience in World War II was that sort of like hook. That was it, hook that sort of got me in. And I'm now super interested in it. But yeah, so there's a few there, but the main me looking at how messy my house is. There's
very tidy to me.
Over there. This is the tiny neat corner, but there's a whole some toilet roll. But yeah, there's a whole load of my house is in rearrangement mode, so this is the corner where everything kind of looks okay. It's that side that everything's shoved to. So I do a lot of research. I do a lot of online research because it's obviously a lot of time most up to date. But I love looking through books because everybody, not just me, spends way too much time on a computer. And it drives me nuts because it's that like constant hunched at a computer. So I like when I do research to be able to just old school it and just get books out everywhere.
Oh, nice.
A lot of time I do end up just photographing the books and then the decent bits, the like relevant things, and then making it into a file or something. But so the largest we do is Soviet women in World War II.
Okay.
But we also cover all sorts of different historical periods in ranges, and we've also got a community miniatures project where people I get people to vote for who they want to be made into a miniature, and then it's like, pitch your character. So it means that they then are like, ha ha ha, I've tricked the world into educating each other about women from history. So it's almost like, pitch your character to the gang, and then there's a vote at the end on who we make, because obviously this is all great, everything is great, but it all requires a lot of money to be made. So when people go, oh, can you do that? Can you do that? You're like, yes, but it needs to sell. There's still a business here. So a lot of the times with the ranges, they will be a range because for various reasons, having a chunk of things in that one range is better and more viable, business. And that isn't business in terms of getting 6 Ferraris. It's like making it work and I can pay my bills. But when you do random characters, they're kind of from, different periods. It's like, it's cool, but by itself, what will I do with it? Which is why we do this. It's a side thing, the community miniatures, and then we can all educate each other. And then if one doesn't make it, I'll enter them in the next round and stuff like that. So it's almost like those not death matches, but that sort of thing. To get, it's like if there's enough interest, we'll do these random people because they're cool, and they might not have a reason to use them in any sort of game, but you kind of want them because they're cool. And a lot of people will just paint. They won't necessarily game with them. They're just nice little projects, and people make dioramas and all sorts with them, or just have that representation. So I absolutely love doing the historical because I get to learn about it. Then I get to stick it in my mind because my mind's an absolute filter. It just sort of goes. So by telling people about it, then actually sticks it in my mind. And I've kind of made a dream job by getting to somehow mix in war games, guinea pigs, and education, because part of me really wanted to be a teacher, but I don't want to go back to a school ever again because they're a place of hell. So I get to teach people on my own sort of terms, and outside of any like structure like that. So I get to do the teaching, but in a nice way. I didn't have a good time at school.
Really?
Really? What do you mean?
Can't tell.
Yeah,
school's a weird one, isn't it? It's like everyone I speak to has had a totally different experience, and it's like it makes me realize like I'm lucky in some respects, but also I did have some bad experiences myself as well. And I think an interesting thing as well is that like we come from that generation where it was before, like being a nerd was cool. Like, no, we were just nerds, and like I was kind of like a midway between an alt kid and a nerd. So it's like very much like I get a lot of crap for like liking the bands I liked and the way my hair was and whatever, music, etc. And it blows my mind that now seemingly that doesn't matter anymore. Like it's cool to be a nerd, and like everyone, like most kids seem to be like quite alternative anyway, that like that's the cool. And I'm like, what? So I went through all that crap then, and like now it's like you just do what you want, free for all. And I'm like, I mean, it's cool, I'm happy for them. I'm happy there's not that division, but at the same time I'm like, what? So why do people, because I remember like having conversations with people where I would talk about music because I just love music, and they'd be like, oh, you listen to stuff other than rock and metal? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, but you can't. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't? And like, oh, because you like this. And I'm like, yeah, but I also like this. Like, why does it have to be rules? Like, then you get to adult age and you realize that no one gives a fuck. Like you do.
Yeah. I wish they said that at some point. It'll be all right because no one will give a fuck. What was I gonna say? Well, the gatekeeping thing.
Right. Yeah.
Where it's so tempting to gatekeep because so I was always weird Star Wars kid, and now it's like, oh yeah, I see. And it can be so easy for your brain to be like, no, that's my thing. I've earned the thing by liking it when it wasn't cool to like. And then you've kind of got to like go, come on, monkey brain. But like, it's good. People are liking the thing that you like. But also you're like, yeah.
This is something I don't get about fandoms these days, right? It's a bit controversial, but I think it's true. Because like, I'm a big fan of pro wrestling, right? And I hear a lot of people going like, no, you're wrong. And you're like, so what do you mean I'm wrong? Oh, you can't think that. Well, it's an opinion. So by very nature, it's not right or wrong. It's just an opinion. Like, I can like this thing and you can dislike it and we agree to disagree. But instead, they'd rather have an argument about it. And you get it a lot with like Star Wars. It's like, I hate the new films. I hate what they've done. And it's like, well, there are some people that love them. Granted, it's not like loads, but there are people that were like, yeah, that Last Jedi, great movie. And I'm kind of like indifferent about it. I'm like, it's all right. But I didn't understand the like overwhelming hatred. I'm like, it's just a movie. It's a franchise. I get that it's you loved Star Wars when you were young. I get that, but like stuff changes, things change, and like it's entertainment. That's the only thing I always look at. This is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be something that you get like angry over and you get frustrated with and upset and like you want it to be better. I can relate to that. Like pro wrestling, I'm like, oh, I wish it was better in this regard, but like I don't sit there like getting angry and upset and like and like if someone says something that I don't agree with, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's what you think. That's fine.
A meme of like, what have they done to my boy? But yeah, one of the things that I occasionally will like sort of tell myself, and that fits into the business as well, is that like it's not for me. Right. Like some of the latest Star Wars stuff. Big fan of the shows rather than the films. Not so hot on the latest films, but they're not for me. They're not made for me. There's that whole like, okay, I've seen younger generations enjoy it, so why would I sort of crap all over it? It's not for me, it's okay for me to have my opinion if I don't like the thing, but not to just kind of tell anyone who does like it that they're wrong, or to write long worded letters to Lucasfilm or whatever. And I think that's also happened in the hobby, because they see there's one, I won't even name drop it because not out of politeness, just no one should go there. It's like, there's one really old forum for wargaming, and they're drop in now and again for some like lunch break entertainment.
Are they still using it?
It's straight out of 1995. So when I share
still
this
using
around,
it?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
When I share this around, the people that know will know. We're like, yep, it is. I'll show you afterwards. But yeah, it's straight out of 1995, and everyone in there is just constantly, the kids these days, they're not into war games, they're all into video games instead, and then they'll complain that the games that the kids are playing. So this is from people that have played for a very long time, and they've played mass Napoleonic battles, mass World War II battles, of which there is absolutely nothing wrong with, and I've partaken in somewhat.
Oh, cool.
But like that's what they like, and now they're seeing younger people getting into tabletop, but it's wrong because it's not the way they want. So they're playing fantasy, they're playing with smaller numbers of figures, maybe they're playing licensed games, so they're seeing it as not as pure or not as good. And it's like, nobody's forcing you to play. So like, the hobby's dying, it's dying. And like, well, nobody's taking your game away from you. You can carry on playing your game. Yeah. These people are going to play this game, and it still all filters back into the same hobby. It's like this. Marvel's always the one that pops in. Like,
yeah, that's a good shout.
This new Marvel game is not for you. It's not marketed at you. You don't like Marvel, but all these people are. And more of the kids today aren't going to want to play mass scale Napoleonic, because that's what happens, Things change, what people are into change. And the same way, lots of kids, a while back were mega into World War II because that's the generation that it was. And, maybe they're into something else now. But people having something else doesn't take away your thing. So if you've got a really strong connection to the original Star Wars trilogy, some new stuff that's targeted at younger people or whatever, it's not ruining, it's not taking that away.
Yeah.
So I've had that with the female minis, because the whole thing about the minis that I make is that they're not sexualized. And it was weird that, like you said, niche earlier, and I say it quite a lot with people, like, it's so weird how it's described as a niche, but it's like, it's women wearing clothes. It's not like, I don't know, camels with hats on or something, like, really tapped into this like never discovered niche of women existing and wearing clothes. And that, obviously, that was the biggest kickback, not that it was that I was making women, but it was women in clothes, because I was therefore removing chainmail bikinis from the world. I was banning everything. I was stopping, like, no, I've never been negative about any of it because the entire thing was choice. Yeah. So it's like, I don't mind. You carry on. But people that want something else have that available to them. And I don't know if definitely the internet makes people way more polarized because they want to just have that black and white argument. So yeah, people will be like, oh, you're so prudish, you're taking all this away. And like, I'm not, I own loads of this stuff. It's just nice to not, if the only option you've got is a really sort of weak, and a lot of them aren't even empowered sexual figure, that's a whole other thing. But that sort of, really weak figure, falling over in a bikini, but with a massive sword. Like, that's fine. It's a trope. Like, that's been throughout the whole thing. And other people would say it's absolutely not fine. I'm of the opinion that, yeah, it's fine, but it shouldn't be a mission to find a woman in a suit of armor. Just doing a thing. So it's all about the choice. But people are like, no, we can't handle this. And a bit like you said about music, you're like, I like this, I also like this. No, that's not. So sometimes I end up like getting the wrong people because I'm like, no, it's all about choice, all about choice. They're like, see some of them figures out there with it. I'm like, no, that's also fine. It's also fine. There's just this constant, like, everything has to be pitted against each other. So
I don't get that.
Yeah, people will send me like, oh, have you seen this new range by someone? Oh, they've got a bit low top on. I'm like, yeah, but that's their thing. Like, people are buying it. It's not illegal, so it's fine. It's just, I just want to do something else. Doesn't mean I hate the other.
Right.
The other thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
it's always like that. Oh, does this antagonize you? Does this bother you?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm like, no.
No, it doesn't.
I'm like, I've got one on order. And you just can't get their head around it. And say with that, like, old school, yeah. Or these, because there's this whole thing about how women, people of colour, queer people, anyone other than a straight white man basically is coming into the hobby and ruining it. And there's that whole go woke, go broke, and it's like we've just appeared out of nowhere to ruin the hobby. And it's like, it just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, that's what I wonder about. Like, how exactly is more people from lots of different backgrounds joining this hobby? How is that a bad thing? Like, how is that ruining it? I don't understand that concept. Like, it's
like, even if you want to just carry on playing with old white guys, no one's stopping you. That's going to be the bit that clips.
What a sentence.
But yeah, it's like nobody's stopping you doing your thing. It just means other people are having their nice time, so you can continue playing with all white guys.
I love that.
Not illegal.
I was trying to take it seriously, and you're just pushing it more, and I'm just like, oh, it's brilliant. Oh gosh.
I did. Oh, sorry, I'm on a whole thing now. I did a panel a while back, a couple of years ago, on I can't remember what it was called. It was like respect in the hobby. So it was cool. It was like, where is too far? Where do you draw the lines in historical gaming? So it's, there's things like, if you're playing World War II, you're playing Nazis and stuff like that. So it was a really good discussion on where the line is with stuff. I can't remember what the term for it was, but it was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed it because it was one where it's like, there's not really a right answer. It's,
do you mean like
historical, comfortable? Yeah,
like historical accuracy. Is that what you
mean? It was a bit of that, and just the fact that you're playing war. So, in war games, you are recreating war, and it was just that, like, it was something like the ethics of it, and it was quite a rhetorical chat, and it was a really good one. And in that, there's a really out of context bit for me, where there's a certain, not to tar everyone with the same brush, but there are people who always play the Nazis, like, okay, it's a game and you need both sides and all this sort of stuff, but there are some that are a little bit too into it. Like, that's the bad part of the hobby. But even that, in my argument there, because I ended up, I think they kind of had me on as like the super woke one, and they ended up going, what? Because I was like, no one's stopping you. Yeah. So if you want to like do whatever, like, weirdo game with your mate wearing your replica uniforms in your living room, most countries it's not illegal, so no one's stopping you. But if you're doing it in public, yes, people may stop you because it's not just about you. But most of this stuff, if you want to do it, like in life, in general life, no one's going to stop you. It's just therefore when there becomes an audience and you're putting it in front of people, they might.
That's very interesting to me. Like just that whole concept, you know, like
some people, well, this is probably not what you should do in a video where it's people introducing people to the hobby. You sometimes get people wearing replica World War II uniforms. Very rarely.
What, they actually dress up the part?
Yeah, I haven't seen one recently. But
well, then again, I suppose you could argue that's no different to like people that do historical reenactment.
Oh no, exactly, and that's also a good discussion. But they're never allies. They're always in like SS gear and stuff like that, where they've gone like, this is my excuse to wear, and because again I'm passionate about World War II gaming and historical wargaming. That's part of my like quest, is to just like get those guys out the way. Let's not put you people on front display. I saw some guys recently playing a game in some Native American headdresses, and it was just like, dudes, what are you doing? But yeah, it's like that's the negative perception of that part of the hobby, and it is such a small amount. But when you see them, that's what sticks, you know, that's the thing that sticks. So always extra enrages me, because I'm like, all the work I've done, and then you there with your replica uniform, get out. And not all of them are probably Nazis, but they definitely are dodgy.
I don't think any of them are. It's probably just, as you say, getting too into the game. I mean, I think in general, like computer games and stuff like that, like you like to play as the bad guys. It's interesting. It's different. It's, you know, it's.
Oh, there is a whole like thing with so the fact Games Workshop had to put up a statement last year, I think it was.
Oh wow!
Basically, like, there's no place for fascists in this hobby. Please go.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's a lot of the 40k stuff's kind of satire, sort of like future-y. Well, it's got like elements of that, you know, like fascist regimes and stuff. But people take it in the wrong way.
Okay, yeah.
God Emperor and stuff. But it's a critique of it. But now that it's that thing where something gets bigger, that message is kind of lost. So people will then style that sort of things. And I think what's really important is to just like get it away as soon as possible, because you kind of start letting these little. There's a really good analogy that I heard not that long ago, but I've heard it a lot since then. It was like how a biker bar becomes a Nazi bar. And it's like one guy comes in and he's got like the patch on or something, but he's all right. So you kind of let him in because he's not causing any trouble. And then he starts bringing his mates. And it was basically like it spirals, and then the other customers don't come anymore. And before you realise it, your biker bar is now a Nazi bar because you let the first point in. And I think that's been a really
setting a precedent. That's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's like, you let the person in that seems okay, and that's the like, ooh, but they're not causing trouble. So it's that sort of reasons why sometimes you should just not tolerate anything of that nature, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
Because you'd be like, oh, there's that dude. He always brings his cap, whatever. But he's in like, then other people will be like, oh, great. To the point that you end up with like a grown man at a trade show in Plymouth wearing a Hitler Youth uniform.
Wow.
But yeah, but the hobby's great. The hobby's great, and everyone should get into it. But yeah, these are all tiny like incidents, and again, that's.
I suppose every industry, every fandom's got.
Everyone's got them. Yeah, it's like that whole family thing. Everyone's got that uncle.
It's like you take. We spoke about Star Wars earlier. That obviously there's very obvious comparisons there to Nazi regime and stuff like that, and it's purposeful. Like even George Lucas admitted that. Like it was done by design. But,
and I think online is where a lot of it goes wrong, because those are the people that are loud online, and again with the hobby you see it, at least they get like, I've been noticing on Twitter a lot, they really get shot down at least, but there's still pockets of awful, And what bothers me, especially with women in gaming, is if I see now, like if I was to get into the hobby now, brand new, I'd probably go to Facebook groups, because that's what I do with stuff I get into now. I'm like, where's the Facebook group for it? She's like, I'm interested in this thing, let's join this Facebook group. And then you see just some awful, because there's some guy in there that's not being just chucked out or whatever, and then you go, yeah, so I'm not going to do that thing, actually. Whereas that is, you know, you've seen that, but it's not representative. It's just such a tiny part of it. So trying to just sort of like get them, get them quickly, I think is a good key. And it's definitely getting a lot better online for that. Because I used to get into a lot of arguments all the time about women in gaming across Facebook forums and stuff. I was called a genetic freak because women's brains aren't made for it. So thereby me existing makes me like an X-Man or something, which is kind of cool, I guess. But I'd kind of like, you know, weather controlling powers rather than just like you can play war games. It's like the worst X-Man to have. Like, but yeah, it's just so weird. But now I'll kind of like, I oversee it like a matron. I'm like, I'm not going to get involved. I'll occasionally put a sarcastic comment and then unsubscribe and run away, because I'm like, nope, not going back, because it'll take up my day. But it's usually like, if there's anyone lurking here that's reading this, please know that this guy is an absolute douche, and there are much nicer places. You're welcome to PM me. And then just like, go away.
I just want to move it forward and discuss your what would you say overall you've learned, like from a business perspective, what would you say are the biggest lessons you've learned through your work with wargaming and miniatures and everything?
One part would be to stay yourself, which kind of a bit like from earlier, that you can emulate to a degree, but putting yourself into it and doing what you want to do is important. And I've definitely struggled with that. So there were parts where I went, right, I need to be taken very seriously. I need to be a business. I'm a business, but you know, like proper business person. It's gonna make my office all grey. I'm gonna wear a suit. I didn't wear a suit to work, but almost in there, like, I'm gonna be this, and we're gonna be proper, and all the posts are gonna be really formal. And like, it's not me, and people know it's not you as well. So I very much put a lot of myself into it now. And even like trade shows, I used to be like, right, I need to look like the other guys, because these are the people that are successful. I need to look like this. And I went, it's not me though. And that's why I'm doing this. So I want it to be, you know. So now we have balloons and colouring in stands, and it's entirely different, but it takes a lot of confidence to be able to do that, because obviously I'm blowing up a load of rainbow balloons and everyone's looking at me like, what is this that has arrived in our hobby? And now, you know, people love it because they're like, yes, that's the stand with the rainbow balloons, and our kids love it as well, because it's like, it's a really welcoming. I had a lovely comment at Expo where someone was like, I feel a bit intimidated by a lot of war games, because she'd come from board game land. She said, I want to get into it, but I feel intimidated, but I'm not intimidated on your stand. I'm like, yes. And a lot of what the success of Bad Squiddo, I don't think it would have been there if I hadn't just been true to myself, basically. But there is a lot to be said for it. There's obviously, you know, business elements to put into things. I wouldn't go fully, never go full 100% Annie. There's that way awful lens. But yeah, you can make it your own thing. You don't have to do what everyone else does. Because it obviously works to some degree, as it has been working for those people, but there's always going to be fresh ways to do stuff, and I've always wanted to make something that other people aren't doing, because otherwise what's the point?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. What's the best advice you've ever received?
I don't know now. Give me a good half hour of silence where I go, I don't know. It's probably Oh, I don't know. That was probably along the lines of screw 'em, but yeah.
Well, hey, that
was,
could be advice.
It was probably that like don't necessarily copy what everyone else does. Be yourself, to some to some degree. I'm sure there's some awesome advice that I'll think of later, but yeah.
Well, I'm gonna push you for that. What's the biggest life lesson you've ever learned?
That's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Well, this question. This is the thing. The reason I asked these two questions is that it's like two different perspectives. Because the best advice thing is like what someone else has told you.
Yeah.
But then life lesson is more like you in your own life, personal to you, that you've learned. That's like, okay, you know. And there's many, isn't there, that we've learned throughout life. But I don't know. Is there one particular life lesson that speaks out to you? Like, this.
I think the trust your gut and believe in yourself. There's a lot to be said for it, especially when there's so many people that just exist to put you down, and it's the whole thing where it's not you, it's them. And I think that's got me through a lot of things where I've gone, it's not personal. What they are doing is them. It's whatever's going on with them and their own history and their own heads is making them say that to you. So yeah, it's not about you, it's about them. So just to keep persevering, and if you think you've really got your heart on something, just do it, and don't let someone wee all over it, basically.
I needed to hear that today. Thank you. Yeah, just thinking about stuff I'm going through at the moment. It was like, thanks for that. As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, upcoming projects, we're mostly just catching up from Expo at the moment. Sorting out Tree Pen, which you should look up, because that will be in the shop afterwards, and you'll be able to get into the Pledge Manager late if you want it even sooner. And check out the advert if you haven't seen it with Christian Reeve there. And I've been quoting it a lot as well.
Tree Pen! Get your Tree Pen!
He is with you forever. And just check us out. I'm all over the internet. Even if you're not into minis, we do a lot of just general cool stuff like pens, and learning about women from history. If you just basically put Bad Squiddo Games, I'm sure I'll put the links somewhere below. But yeah, all over the internet. Come give us a follow. You don't even have to buy anything. It's free. And yeah, we do cool stuff like colouring in as well. So you should definitely check us out. And yeah, that's it. What should I say? Guinea pigs. Yes, we have lots of guinea pigs. Come look at guinea pig stuff.
Cool.
Guinea pigs.
Love guinea pigs. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Just wanted to say a massive thank you and wish you all the best with your projects and your business.
Thank you very much. I look forward to doing some other stuff with you as well at some point.
I would love that.
Weirdy voices and stuff.
Okay,
awesome.
well,
thank you.
Thank you so much. And to the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.